I've never done a knife review on this channel before, but I was looking for information on this knife and there weren't any YouTube videos on it, so I figured I'd better make one. This is a Herter's improved Bowie knife. My grandfather passed away when I was 14 years old and he left me this knife. My grandfather's name was William L. Todd, and he was a retired Army Master Sergeant. He fought in World War II, and he was Vice President of the Bank of Virginia. He was an avid outdoorsman. He was a sailor who owned a sailboat. He was a hunter, and he was a camper. At the age of 14, I guess I didn't really appreciate this knife, and it stayed in a box in my parents' basement for many years, and anyhow, the sheath mildewed and the blade became rusty, so I recently restored the blade, but you can still see some pitting from where it just laid in that box and rusted for many years, unfortunately. I used brown shoe polish to restore the sheath. The sheath is beautifully carved, and these metal studs were rusted, so I ended up painting them with black nail polish to cover the rust, and the same thing with the snap on the retaining strap. Later in my life, I kind of got into knives, and I really learned to appreciate a good knife, and this is a great one. It's made out of some type of high carbon steel. I don't know if it's 1075 or 1080 or 1095, but it's definitely not stainless. It has a flat grind. I measured and weighed this knife, and let me read you what I came up with. The blade is 5 inches or 13 centimeters. The overall length of the knife is 10 inches or 25 centimeters. It weighs 4.1 ounces or 116 grams, and the sheath weighs 1.2 ounces or has a mass of 34 grams. So the grand total of that is 5.3 ounces or 150 grams. From what I've gathered, this knife was probably purchased from a mail order catalog called Herter's, probably in the 1960s. And in my mind, is ahead of its time. It's a full tang knife, and the tang and the handle are just perfectly flush, very comfortable. I don't know if the term bushcraft even existed back in the 1960s, but this has all the attributes of a great bushcraft knife, as I'll demonstrate. For one thing, it has a very sharp 90-degree spine and strikes a ferrocerium rod. The knife is also well suited for food preparation, like cutting up this zucchini for a nice hibachi. One of the main things I use a knife for is cutting parachute cord. I'm always making shelters or other little doodads out of parachute cord. One of the only negative things I have to say about this knife is the fact that it slips right through the retention strap. The knife works well the way I like to carry it, which is at the 4 o'clock position. I think this knife would work well for self-defense. I'd call this a drop point, but it's kind of like a clip point. It's very stabby, very sharp, and it would be good with its thin profile. I think it would penetrate ribs well. It's got enough length that it could reach the subclavian artery for sensory removal. In the forward grip, it might be a little slippery because this wood is quite smooth. It would probably work better in the reverse grip, but we'll try it in the forward grip and see if we cut our hands. Hey, fortunately, I didn't cut my hands. It's pretty good at feather sticking. With its full tang, I'm pretty confident that I could baton with this knife. But since this is my grandfather's knife and it's irreplaceable, I'm not gonna push my luck and do anything that might be destructive. One thing this knife is not is a chopper. It's very light and has the feel of a Kephart knife or a Mora knife, not really designed to chop. However, as I learned from Cody Lundeen in his Desert Drifter course, there are ways to cut down fairly large saplings without even having to chop. Once again, this knife is called Herter's Improved Bowie. Doesn't really look like a Bowie knife, does it? The markings include the fact that it was hand forged and made in the USA. But who was this Herter who produced this knife? Well, George L. Herter lived from 1911 to 1994, and he wrote some interesting books. For example, How to Get Out of the Rat Race and Live on $10 a Month, which was a book of survival skills. So I guess the idea was that you could just go live in the woods and survive, and you know, the $10 a month would probably be a bonus. He also wrote a book called How to Live with a Bitch. And he wrote a book called The History and Secrets of Professional Candy Making. So all these books were sold in his catalog, and this catalog was evidently a great big catalog about the size of the Sears catalog that was just chock full of outdoors. And somehow, I think George L. Herter's business was sold and resold, and eventually ended up, you know, kind of being the progenitor of like Bass Pro Shop and Cabela's. And there's still a brand of ammunition called Herter's that's sold at Bass Pro Shop and Cabela's. I'm not sure if there's any relationship there or not. I couldn't find out for sure anywhere on the internet, but if you know, please leave it in the comments. So anyway, this knife is no longer available. I think these were made during the 1960s, but they're on eBay anywhere from $30 to $50, I guess, depending on the condition. And I would definitely recommend this knife. I think it's really ahead of its time. As a bushcraft knife, it's got everything you need. It's got full tang. I like carbon steel. I don't really care about rust, so I just want a knife that's easy to sharpen and can take a beating. I wish I knew what type of steel this was. I like 1075 myself, but I might actually baton with it if it was 1075 and I knew it for sure. But anyway, I would highly recommend this knife if you can find one and get your hands on it. And great for self-defense, great for bushcraft, just a great all-around utility knife. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. If you're new to this channel, it's not really a knife channel. It's called Country Shootin', and it's more about firearms and also kind of examining the equipment of 20th century combatants and going to the woods and operating with their equipment. So I hope if you found this channel, you'll like and subscribe. And for those of you who already subscribed, thanks, and I'll see you next time.